Although Manchester United have been starved of silverware in recent years, their legacy still places them among the most successful clubs in English football. Yet, for many fans, the days when they could take pride in their team feel like they belong to a distant past. Everyone knew it would be tough after the Sir stepped down, but perhaps no one imagined it would be this dire. It's not just the glory days that are fading. The legacy left behind by Ferguson, and before him, the man who laid the foundation of the club's culture, Sir Matt Busby, is slowly eroding. And that's what today's story is about. A legacy that is vanishing, or rather, being erased. Why was Manchester United once considered the biggest club in the world? How did they rise? And how did they fall? How long does it take to destroy a culture? And more importantly, how long does it take to build it back up again? Love stories like this? Subscribe for more. It's been nearly 12 years since Manchester United last won the Premier League title. In that same period, Manchester City, the very club Sir Alex once famously called the noisy neighbours.
Okay, at the moment, we have a neighbour, and sometimes neighbours are noisy. You can't do anything about them.
Has lifted 20 trophies, including 7 league titles. They now dominate not just the city, but arguably all of English football. Yet, despite more than a decade of decline, United remain a global giant. Respected, remembered, and still revered. Let's hear it from Pep Guardiola himself.
I have 3 idols in my life. Michael Jordan, Tiger Woods, and Julia Roberts. Okay? So Julia Roberts years ago came to Manchester. Not in 1890 with Sir Alex Ferguson win the titles. Came in the period like we were better than United, these 4 or 5 years. Huh? And he went to visit Man United. She didn't come to see us. So that's why this is, even I win the Champions League, will not be compared for the fact that Julia Roberts come to Manchester, they don't come to see us.
The word glory, immortalised in the anthem-like chant, "Glory, glory, Man United," once captured the very essence of the club throughout the past century. So, what gave rise to that glory? Manchester United is one of the oldest and most storied football clubs in history. It would not be an exaggeration to say it is the oldest club to have survived into the modern game while maintaining consistent success. Founded in 1878 by the carriage and wagon department of the Lancashire and Yorkshire Railway, it was originally known as Newton Heath Football Club. In 1902, the club adopted the name we know today, Manchester United. One of the most defining and tragic chapters in the club's history came on the 6th of February 1958. Returning from a European Cup clash against Red Star Belgrade, the team's plane crashed during a refueling stop in Munich. The crash claimed 23 lives, including 8 Manchester United players. No one wishes to gain recognition through such devastation, but in the wake of that tragedy, United became a club the entire world sympathised with. And that sympathy wasn't just born out of loss. Under the guidance of their legendary manager, Sir Matt Busby, who survived the crash, the Red Devils rose from the ashes. Just 9 years later, they won the European Cup for the very first time in club history. One of the survivors, Sir Bobby Charlton, scored twice in that final against Benfica. What a story. Sir Matt Busby built more than just a team. He built a culture. Through his youth system and faith in young talent, he shaped a generation famously known as Busby Babes. Over the years, what Busby started evolved into a sacred tradition. In 1980, Busby became club president. 4 years later, he helped appoint fellow Scotsman Alex Ferguson as manager, ushering in yet another golden era. Ferguson, like his predecessor, was deeply invested in nurturing academy players. And so, after the Busby Babes, English football would come to know a new generation, Fergie's fledglings, especially the class of '92. From the day Sir Matt Busby walked through the club's doors in 1945 to Sir Alex Ferguson's retirement in 2013, these 2 Scotsmen were at the helm for 52 of those 68 years. 18 of the club's 20 league titles and all 3 of its European triumphs were won during this era, a period that made United the most successful club in the British Isles. This deeply traditional structure also brought long-term continuity. Players like Gary Neville, Paul Scholes and Ryan Giggs spent their entire careers at United. In fact, all 5 of the most capped players in the club's history came through the youth academy. Under Ferguson alone, 46 players served the club for at least 5 years. It becomes clear that the famous slogan, revived when Cristiano Ronaldo returned, "Once a Red, always a Red," wasn't just a catchy phrase. Manchester United used to be a club where loyalty from players wasn't demanded. It was natural. These are the on-pitch foundations of United's former glory, but the off-pitch factors tell just as much of the story. Looking at the club's old crests, we see that the term football club appeared consistently until 1998. Why was it suddenly dropped that year? Since the early 1990s, football had begun to be viewed not just as sport, but as part of the entertainment industry. The creation of the Premier League in 1992 marked this shift, and it's fair to say that Manchester United were one of the first clubs to recognise the commercial potential this new world offered. Once merely a local football club with a loyal fan base, United underwent a mental transformation, setting the stage to become a global brand. Just like we prefer familiar brands when buying food because we associate recognition with trust, people also form emotional bonds with football clubs. Bonds that go far beyond trust. While traditional advertising can only go so far, clubs inspire something far deeper. The industrialization of football, and clubs beginning to treat fans as customers, might still leave a bad taste for some. But like it or not, this was the new reality of the game. United adapted to that reality far earlier than most. Starting from the late 20th century, the club was being run with a modern, global vision. In the summer of 2001, they held pre-season matches in Malaysia, Singapore, and Thailand. In 2003 and 2004, they toured 5 cities across the United States. In 2005, they traveled to Hong Kong, China, and Japan. In the years that followed, their tours continued through South Africa, the Far East, and America. One step further in that strategy came in 2005, with the signing of South Korean midfielder Ji-sung Park. While Park quickly became a favourite of Ferguson on the pitch, his arrival also opened up a priceless gateway to the East Asian market. At the time, United also signed Chinese forward Fang Zhuo Dong. But unlike Park, Dong failed to make his mark, playing only 3 official matches. Park, on the other hand, continued to serve as an ambassador for the club in Asia long after retiring. During this same period, the club also made major strides in merchandising, launching licensed products across the globe and boosting both brand recognition and image. From 2007 onward, Manchester United consistently topped Forbes' list of the world's most valuable football clubs. Even after everything, they've somehow stayed near the top. All of this illustrates how, over the past quarter century, Manchester United rose to the very top of the football world in terms of brand value, thanks to a remarkably balanced blend of tradition and innovation. According to many, the fragile balance of that tradition and innovation blend was disrupted when the Glazer family arrived at the club in 2003. Strangely enough, this story begins with a racehorse named Rock of Gibraltar. Sir Alex Ferguson was famously passionate about horse racing, a hobby he inherited from his father. He co-owned Rock of Gibraltar, a champion horse that ran in his colours and won 7 races in Ireland. At the time, the horse was valued at around £50 million. However, Ferguson ended up in a legal dispute with his co-owner, Sue Magnier, over the ownership rights. And you might be asking, what does any of this have to do with Manchester United or the Glazers? Well, here's where the two stories meet. Sue Magnier's husband, John Magnier, and his business partner JP McManus were, at that time, the largest shareholders in Manchester United. In other words, Ferguson had just gone to court against his own bosses. This made the rest of the shareholders nervous about potential damage to the club's stability. It was around this time that an American businessman named Malcolm Glazer entered the picture. He purchased 2.9% of the club for £9 million and began closely monitoring developments. Within a year, he had increased his stake to 30%. In 2005, he convinced McManus and Magnier to sell him their combined 28.7% share, giving Glazer control of the club. But he didn't stop there. That same year, using a financial strategy that involved leveraging the club's own assets, Glazer secured 98% of Manchester United's shares, effectively becoming the sole authority. To put it simply, he used the club itself as collateral to borrow the money needed to buy it, amounting to a staggering $787 million. Soon after, he delisted United from the London Stock Exchange, ending its status as a public limited company. From that moment on, the club became dependent on the Glazer name. United fans knew right away that nothing would ever be the same again. Many still refer to the day the takeover was finalised as the day Manchester United died. Since then, one chant has echoed consistently at Old Trafford: Glazers out. Who knows? If not for that racehorse dispute, perhaps the Glazers would have never found an opening to take over the club in the first place. In June 2005, Malcolm Glazer's three sons, Joel, Avram, and Brian, attended their first ever match at Old Trafford, and what a welcome they received. The future owners of the club were met with furious protests from United supporters. Fearing for their safety, the Glazer brothers had to be escorted out of the stadium by police, sneaking out through the players' tunnel and into a police van. Despite everything, the early years of the Glazer era weren't exactly a disaster in terms of sporting success. After all, Sir Alex Ferguson was still in charge. So was David Gill, the club's CEO, and the man overseeing all football operations. The duo continued their work until 2013, and during that period, the Red Devils won 5 more Premier League titles. Between 2008 and 2011, they reached the Champions League final 3 times in 4 years, winning it once. In short, United were still at the summit of European football. What's more, the Glazers had indeed contributed to the club's brand growth, something I mentioned earlier. As brand value increased, so did revenue. This opened the door to major global sponsorships from industries far beyond sport. In 2012, the club signed what was then the biggest shirt sponsorship deal ever, partnering with an American car company for an annual fee of £49 million. Broadcast and matchday revenues skyrocketed compared to previous years. It felt as if United had discovered a money printing machine. But then came the moment every Old Trafford supporter had been dreading. In late June 2013, Sir Alex Ferguson brought his 26-year reign at Manchester United to an end, and alongside him, David Gill also stepped down. This created a serious vacuum for the Glazer family, who had always left football-related decisions to this trusted pair. The Americans, who still referred to the game as soccer, had very limited knowledge of it. Worse yet, they never made any effort to learn, nor did they attempt to understand what this club meant to its fans. To the Glazers, Manchester United was no different from any of their other businesses, and success, like everything else, was measured only in financial terms. In the 4 major American sports, football, baseball, basketball, and ice hockey, there are systems in place to preserve competitive balance. Draft picks and salary caps prevent any one team from dominating for too long, while also giving underperforming teams a chance to catch up. Perhaps that's why the Glazers didn't see much of a problem with a club going many years without winning a title. After all, they also owned the NFL's Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Since the Super Bowl era began in 1967, the NFL has produced 20 different champions in 56 seasons. In that time, the Buccaneers won the title twice, once in 2002 and again in 2020, 18 years apart. And for the Glazers, that was more than enough to be satisfied. In 2014, following the death of Malcolm Glazer, control of the club fully passed to the family, and from that moment on, things only got worse. To replace David Gill as the head of football operations, the family appointed Ed Woodward, whose professional background was in tax consultancy and accounting. Hardly the resume you'd expect for someone tasked with running one of the world's biggest football clubs. And truth be told, Woodward's knowledge of the game and overall vision weren't much different from that of the Glazers themselves. This, ultimately, was the real reason behind United's downfall. After the departure of Ferguson and Gill, they were left in charge of a game they neither understood nor, if we're being honest, even cared about.
The owners of the club, the Glazers, they don't care about the club. As you know, Manchester is a marketing club. They will get his money from the marketing. The sports, they don't really care, in my opinion.
Since then, the delicate blend of tradition and innovation that once defined Manchester United has been heavily tilted, with the tradition side being rapidly stripped away. To focus only on the Busby and Ferguson eras would be short-sighted. From the year 1892, when United first joined the top division of English football, until Ferguson's retirement in 2013, the club had only 17 managers in 121 years. That's roughly one manager every 7 years. Since 2013, however, they've had 9 different managers, including 2 interim ones. The longest serving of them was Ole Gunnar Solskjaer, and he didn't even survive long enough to see out a 3rd season. Though there were rumours that Ferguson was consulted in making these appointments, the final word reportedly always belonged to Ed Woodward. Ironically, Sir Alex Ferguson has spoken positively about the Glazers' role during his own time. "Whenever I wanted a player, they paid the fee," he once said. But Ferguson's requests were always reasonable, and nearly every player he brought in delivered. Nemanja Vidic, Patrice Evra, Michael Carrick, Anderson, Nani, and Antonio Valencia all proved their value and served the club loyally for between 7 and 12 years, remaining true to United's traditional standards. Since the summer of 2013, when Woodward took charge of operations, the number of players who have remained at the club for more than 5 consecutive years is barely more than a handful. Juan Mata, Luke Shaw, Anthony Martial, though his contribution is debatable, and Victor Lindelof. And all this despite United having spent over €1.8 billion on transfers during that period. Angel Di Maria, Anthony Martial, Paul Pogba, Romelu Lukaku, Harry Maguire, Jadon Sancho, and most recently, Antony. Each of them cost more than €60 million. Which of these players truly met expectations? That's for you to decide. Yes, just like United, the blue side of Manchester also spends ridiculous amounts on transfers, but after that level of investment, you'd expect the Red Devils to match, or even surpass them in some areas. Instead, there is nothing United have that City don't. In fact, most of the players sitting on City's bench or buried deep in their rotation would walk straight into United's starting 11. Even the club's once prized academy, long a source of pride, is far less productive today. United used to balance their transfer policy with homegrown talent. Ferguson once said, "I couldn't even picture the backbone of my team without the boys who came through the academy. They were the reason we had stability." About the class of '92, he added, "They were the kids who carried the soul of the club." Since Marcus Rashford and Scott McTominay were promoted to the first team in 2016 and 2017 respectively, only a handful of academy graduates have managed to earn regular places in the senior squad, most notably Alejandro Garnacho, and, more recently, Kobbie Mainoo. This lack of breakthroughs suggests something else, that the club has failed to invest properly in its facilities and youth development over the last decade. Cristiano Ronaldo even highlighted this very issue in his controversial interview, expressing disappointment with the club's stagnation. "Nothing has changed here since Sir Alex left," said Ronaldo. "Nothing changed since I left. The pool, the jacuzzi, even the gym, even some technology, even the chefs, who I appreciate. Lovely people. I thought I'd see new technology, new infrastructure, but I saw the same things I saw when I was 20. After Malcolm Glazer passed away, his sons became more interested in cashing out shares than investing in the club. United supporters did everything they could to stop the decline, but the harsh truth was there wasn't much they could do. As long as the Glazers held ownership, the fans had no real say in how the club was run. Back in 2005, a group of fans even created a new club called FC United of Manchester as an act of protest, but the movement never grew beyond that symbolic gesture. Then came the European Super League fiasco, a moment that didn't just infuriate Manchester United fans, but enraged football supporters across Europe. At the heart of it, Ed Woodward. He stepped down in 2021, but things didn't exactly improve. The Glazers seemed more detached than ever, with their only clear ambition being to sell the club. Gary Neville put it bluntly, they treat it like a toy. Of course they'll sell it, because the only thing they care about is money. Finally, a glimmer of hope arrived in the final days of 2023. British billionaire Sir Jim Ratcliffe bought a 25% stake in the club and signed a deal with the Glazers to take over all football operations. From 2024 onward, structural reforms began under the leadership of Ineos, from the academy to the training grounds. Sir Ratcliffe is one of Britain's most reputable and trusted businessmen. For that reason, United fans are feeling more optimistic than they have in years. Still, some believe that unless the Glazers are fully gone, the club will never return to its glory days. In June 2023, exactly 18 years after the Glazers' takeover, Premier League clubs reached a consensus to limit leveraged buyouts like United's. Such acquisitions will now be capped at around 65% of club assets, making another Glazer-style deal virtually impossible. But in the end, it was Manchester United and their loyal supporters who paid the price. The Americans bought the club in 2005 for roughly £800 million, and now they've sold just 25% of it to Jim Ratcliffe for a price exceeding £1 billion. Of course, if you had the chance to ask them, they'd probably boast about the club's current brand valuation, said to be over $6 billion. But what they've truly left behind is a battered club, from its training facilities to its stadium, from its global fan base to its museum. Yes, in just 12 short years, they managed to dismantle a club's entire structure and erase a century's worth of tradition. And now, a single question lingers in the minds of those at Old Trafford. How long will it take? How long until Manchester United rebuilds the culture that once made them kings, not just of English football, but of Europe? If this story moved you, subscribe. We'll keep telling the ones that matter.